The Harbor rework has arrived. So let's quickly break down the changes and I'll tell you if it's good, bad, or just different. The first major change is to his signature ability. It is now Clove, but Clove has been reworked. Clove is now refreshable. It's on a 40-second cooldown, and instead of throwing it as a projectile, you now go into a smoke screen very similar to Omen's, which means you can place your smoke exactly where you want it. But not only that, when you place it, it forms a normal smoke, not the Clove shield. But you can reactivate the ability to activate the shield. This means you can put a normal smoke down and then choose to shield it whenever you want. Once you activate the shield, it works just like Clove did before. It can block bullets and it can be shot and destroyed. And that means High Tide has moved away from Harbor's signature ability. It's now 200 credits and you get one of them. Otherwise, it works exactly the same as before. Cascade has been completely replaced, well, sort of, we'll get to that in a second, by Storm Surge. Storm Surge has inherited Clove's projectile model, arc, and animation, which just means it'll feel like you're throwing Clove, but instead when it lands, it creates a whirlpool on the ground, which nearsights and slows enemies. This is a great addition to Harbor's kit because the problem before is that all his basic abilities were just smokes. He had like 1 billion smokes and nothing else. Storm Surge brings a much better engagement tool to make his kit way more versatile. And Reckoning has received a full rework. Forget Reckoning where you would have to dance around on the ground to dodge stuns and say hello to Mega Cascade. It's still called Reckoning, but now it's a site-wide cascade that will near sight and slow any enemies hit by the wave. It's kind of similar to Nightfall and Rolling Thunder, the way that it pushes out across sight. Well, at least when they used to be site-wide. This thing is site-wide. This is a great ability and something that Harbor desperately needed. I would say his ult in a vacuum is completely overpowered relative to other ults in the game. But in saying that, there's still some rather large limitations with his base kit. Harbor will definitely feel better in both pro play and ranked, but for different reasons. You shouldn't expect Harbor's performance in ranked to skyrocket out of nowhere because he still feels lacking of the basic tools required to be a solo controller. He only has one Clove available at a time, which means High Tide has to be reserved exclusively for hitting sights so you can smoke all entrances, which makes it quite inflexible. But in a double controller setup, you get to be more creative with how you use it. And with less total smokes plus a better ability to engage, I see him fitting into that flex role as a second controller better than before. So we might see teams returning to Harbor Viper at the pro level, but I don't see Harbor becoming a meta staple in the ranked environment. Clove was already one of the strongest ranked agents in the game in Act 5 and managed to avoid nerfs, making Clove even stronger as everyone else got relatively weaker. Since 1108, Clove's non-mirror win rate in mid to high elo climbed even higher after already being at the highest in the game. As an example, after the massive 11.08 patch, Clove's win rate in Ascendant jumped nearly a whole %. It was already the highest and it climbed to 57% by the end of patch 1109. So I'm very glad that they've now received some what I think are pretty impactful nerfs, and I think Riot has targeted the right areas. Clove now has a cap of max 1 post-mortem smoke, which removes a lot of freedom for Clove and makes dying more punishing. And pick-me-ups overheal has been reduced from 100 to 50. What this means is it's now harder for Clove to snowball the game. And this nerf is in line with the design philosophy of the previous nerfs as well. This one just hits a bit harder. Where Clove's power comes from in ranked is their ability to secure advantages. Once you and your team get ahead, Clove is really great at making sure you stay there. Their heal busts them up so they can take another proper fight, and those post-mortem smokes come in clutch in the final moments of the round way too often. So I do expect the gap between controllers to shrink in this patch. Because Clove is so popular, you should see a jump in win rates from the other controllers as a knock-on effect of these nerfs. Clove is definitely not dead yet. Did you bloody see what I did there? They'll still be one of the better controllers in ranked, but they're going to be less of a default pick now. Time for our first map tier list, and of course it's going to be Abyss. How are you liking the changes? I've personally found the map much more enjoyable. Are there any new sleeper picks that you've been dominating with that you think we should watch out for? Be sure to let us know below. Now let's move into the duelists. We're going to move straight into the S tier because there's a couple of interesting things that I want to talk about. Neon is benefiting hugely on Abyss after the big changes, and she's moving all the way up from B to S. One big factor in this is Cypher's pick rate went from 35% to 15%, and Chamber went from 27% to 38%. Neon is very good versus Chamber and very bad versus Cypher, so she's getting a huge benefit from the change in matchup. Unlike Waylay, who's taken a hit on most maps, which is partly because she requires good support to be able to thrive, but with less util floating around, she's got less support. On Abyss though, she's seen a small jump in performance, and that's just because she's got so much room on the map to work with. And the changes to B site actually give her more options on both attack and defense. You've got more places where you can play aggressive out of your refract, and on attack side, diving in with light speed is much less risky. The same can be said for Jett, who rounds out our S tier duelists. The extra nooks and crannies give Jett a lot more options to play with defensively on B site and using Cloudburst to reposition, get in and get out. Onto our initiators now, and I've made a couple of corrections. I was a bit too harsh on Fade. I'm moving her from C tier to B tier. She's still not great, but she definitely deserves better than being in C tier. And it's nice to see a lot more success in the variety of initiators that you can play on Abyss, with both Teo and KO performing better, and feeling like you have good options in S tier with both Gecko and Skye continuing to perform well and challenging Sova for that crown. Sova is performing at a consistent rate across all ranks. Gecko's success is slightly skewed towards the lower ranks, and Skye's is slightly skewed towards the higher ranks. In the lower ranks, you get a bit more room to breathe, and just getting plant down is such a big factor. And in the higher ranks, where the pace of play is a lot higher, Skye can set your team up with a really fast tempo. Now moving on to our controllers, where there's the big changes this patch, obviously. Abyss is where Harbor continued to see pro play even at Champions, with NRG using him to win. But Cascade was quite useful on Abyss. It was very helpful in helping you scale up the long lines. I don't think Storm Surge will be as valuable on Abyss as the Cascade specifically. Even though I think Harbor's kit overall has gotten better, he might have actually gotten worse on this map specifically. Potentially I'm thinking too much from a pro coach's perspective and applying that lens rather than the correct ranked lens. But we'll see how it plays out, and I'll make sure that I update you in the next tier list. So if you haven't already and you appreciate the content, consider hitting subscribe below. And in case you were a little bit cheeky and you skipped past what I said about the Harbor changes, make sure you go back and watch that so you understand the full context of what I'm saying. The problem with Abyss is that it's a really complex map to smoke, and it doesn't suit a lot of the controller class. Things look really whack from a stats perspective. So if you're new to the controller or playing in the lower ranks, I'm still going to recommend Clove. Just having an ult that is an extra body is really important, and with more longer range fights, you're more likely to take a couple of body shots where pick me up is still going to be helpful to heal up and take another duel. But if you're a controller main through and through and you want the challenge and you want to learn and have the most impact, this is an Astra map. Don't be fooled by the 1108 number changes on Astra. They really don't affect how you actually play the game, especially with everyone else's numbers changing as well. So she came out relatively unscathed. She has the shortest smoke cooldown in the game and has global range. Cosmic Divide is an incredibly valuable ultimate, especially with the wide open spaces on Abyss. And it's always fun to do a full fake setup by dumping and popping all of your stars on one site and then using Cosmic Divide for the other. Okay, so Abyss is looking really healthy, but now we're moving over to Bind, which does not look so healthy in terms of variety of meta. I predicted that this might be the case, but I didn't expect it to be so stark, especially in the duelist class. Reyna has fallen off a cliff, and I'm moving her down to C tier. The only place where Reyna is performing well is in Iron and Bronze, and who knows how many Smurfs are overinflating that. I'm also bulk sliding down Jett, Yoru, and Waylay from A to B tier, and that's because the name of the game on Bind is Util Volume. If you've paid attention to any of our previous segments on Bind, you would know that this is the case, which puts Jett and Waylay in a really bad spot. This is still Yoru's best map, and he's remaining in A tier as a secondary duelist. He's only squeezed out because of the surge in performance by Phoenix. Now, I was completely surprised by this at first. I had Phoenix in C tier last tier list. He's never been good on Bind. But after analyzing the data and reviewing the meta, it became completely obvious. What were the main targets of 1108? Initiator timings and smoke timings. Phoenix is just that perfectly sized jigsaw puzzle that you've been looking for most comps. He can help out with the controller duties, which are a huge burden on Bind with 2 entrances to both sites, whilst also bringing flashes to help out your initiator, and you can use his molly like an initiator to clear corners or like a controller to help stall. And not only that, with a more gunplay focused meta, just having an extra body from his ult is insane, especially when you consider on attack side, it's very easy to go for a double orb farm round. You push up A long, take that orb, hit the TP, take the showers orb. You can be ulting like a bajillion times a game. And for the record, I ran the numbers. A bajillion is the correct number. Don't at me on that, all right? Okay, cool. Let's move on to initiators. There is a clear dichotomy between who's good and who's not. Moving Sova up to B tier. Quite interestingly, he's made some ground towards Fade in the Recon initiator slot, but you're still better off going with the flexibility of a hybrid initiator in Gecko or Skye. Moving on to controllers now, and even more disparity, a very heavy bottom half of the tier list. Astra and Omen are just getting killed on Bind right now, and the changes to Harbor are not helpful for him on Bind. And with this nerf to Clove, I'm bringing them down to B tier, which means A tier is completely empty and the clear number one controller on Bind right now is Brimstone. There's just no one else that I could recommend picking other than Viper if you already have a Brimstone. Pairing these two together gives you a huge advantage with smoke timings, and you can pretty much just win through a war of util attrition. Now let's move over to Sentinels, where it's pretty much the opposite effect, where there's a lot of Sentinels performing really well. But the ones who don't perform well are your traditional info Sentinels. As a Sentinel player right now, you either want to have a wall install Senti or an aggro mobile Senti in your arsenal. And with the addition of Vito, you now have two options in each of those subclasses for you to choose from. Thanks, Rito. And I'm pushing Sage back up into S tier. I did drop her down last patch. I mentioned how the change to her wall would have bigger impact on some maps than others. Bind was one of the maps where I did think she would find less value from it, but I was wrong. She's back in S tier. All of these Sentinels are great, and it does come down to a little bit of a style preference. But if you'd like a recommendation, the Sentinel that I think is most flexible when fitting into any team comp and has the highest carry potential because they can actively affect both the attack and the defense side really well is Deadlock. Jumping over to the full tier list now, and you can see it's a really wacky looking tier list. Lots of agents down the bottom except for the Sentinel class. And I do just want to highlight how much of a must pick Raze is right now. Playing Bind without a Raze on your team is like eating a plain cookie when you're expecting chocolate chips. Like, it's so much worse. And that's why she's in at least one of our duo picks for every elo. All right, looking at how unbalanced the Bind meta is right now is making me sad. So let's move over to Corrode, where it's in a much healthier state again. I've been really enjoying watching the Corrode meta develop this year. And I think what is interesting is that as soon as it started to be figured out a little bit, Riot just drops a massive nuke of agent changes, and most of the agents that got affected were prominent on Corrode. So people are still trying to figure out the map and figure out what agents are now good on it as well. So let's have a look at the duelists, and ISO has slipped all the way down to C tier. You'd probably think that ISO's kit would work well in this meta, but this meta actually pulls away from the way that ISO likes to play the game. ISO wants lots of little fights and skirmishes to get value out of his kit. Everyone's cooldowns across the board getting nerfed means ISO's suppress is less valuable, and it also encourages you to play hyper explosive, where ISO can't keep up with dash duelists, or a much slower contacty style. And if you're trying to contact and use your shield, you give your position away, so it becomes a really awkward spacing and timing dilemma for ISO. I'm pretty happy with how my analysis and my predictions played out for the rest of the duelists on Corrode. Yoru struggling in everywhere but high elo, but as a second duelist, he's much better. And as we predicted, Raze took that leap in performance, making a really solid core trio of duelists in S tier: Neon, Phoenix, and Raze. Neon's almost in an S plus level right now. The changes to her sprint recharge are a lot more forgiving, and the extended duration is really helpful in your average ranked game. Neon's a great self-sufficient duelist who can go out and get her own pick by isolating a defender by using her wall for cover, then stunning them to get an easy fight, picking them off, and then snowballing the round. And there's a lot of little pockets of space on Corrode that Neon is very good at punishing you for playing in. Now let's move over to initiators, and depending on what elo you look in, kind of changes how this tier list would look if it was done on a per elo basis. And that's a good thing, because what it means is the initiators are actually really closely balanced on Corrode right now. There's an argument for all 5 agents in A and S tier that they could be swapped and jumbled around. So it really is up to your preference on this one. The only caveat that I would watch out for is Teo. Teo is incredibly strong on Corrode. I've been saying this for yonks now. And before you at me, don't worry, we already ran the numbers. It's been exactly 2 yonks since I've been harping on about this. You do just need to accompany him with some kind of aerial initiation util, like a flash or a dizzy or a recon, so that you can pop into sight. We're also seeing a good bit of variety in Corrode's controller class. This is the map where I think Harbor could find his feet. Maps where he was previously good, Cascade got value. I consistently failed to find Cascade value with Harbor on Corrode. And Storm Surge is just the kind of tool that you need. You can pop it into those pockets of space to create picks as you push. You can use it defensively to stall. Defensively, being able to use Cove as a regular smoke in the entry choke points is huge for Harbor. Mid is so hotly contested, and the rotates on defense are long if you don't have mid. So the changes to Cove just allow him to get that smoke down in a good initial reaction time, even if he's out of position. And I think Clove will stay in S tier on Corrode. The nerfs are impactful, yes, but I think their ability to instantly smoke, metal, contest mid is still one of the most impactful things that you can do as as a controller in ranked. And as we move over to Sentinels, there's a really healthy balance in pick rate going on with the Sentinels right now. Only Killjoy is getting picked under 10% of the time, and she's had a notable boost in performance, which makes sense in the perspective of the Vice and Cypher nerfs. This is another map where I did move Sage down and are moving her back up to S tier. I think I mentioned in the last tier list that I thought she probably would end up jumping back up or something along those lines. It's definitely a Chamber and Sage meta right now on Corrode. And as we look at the tier list, what we love to see is only 2 agents in C tier across the board. Everyone else is B and above. Lots of agents towards the top of the tier list. That means agent variety. That means good balance. We love to see it, which allowed for maximum agent variety in our duo recommendations. All right, now let's jump over to Haven, where there's a bit of a big meta shakeup. So starting with the duelist, you know what I just mentioned about ISO before? Well, Haven is where it can get it. Haven promotes lots of gunfights and skirmishing, more dry swings because you've got more areas of the map to worry about. And with less util, ISO is able to push the pace, pop that shield, and get snowballing. His long, narrow abilities also just suit Haven's long, narrow lane map layout. And despite seeing a worse performance on other maps, Reyna has actually seen a slight increase in performance on Haven. In a similar vein to ISO, Reyna is able to create lots of skirmishes by pushing aggressively into off angles, and she has lots of options to do that. And with less util flying around to clear her out, she's more likely to punish you for not clearing her properly. So be careful out there, kiddos. We're also pushing Phoenix up into S tier as a solo duelist, not just as a secondary duelist anymore. And that's because of the same reasons that we mentioned on Bind, with Haven being more util demanding, he becomes that perfect puzzle piece. And if you missed that or accidentally skipped past it, I would go back and watch it now, because Phoenix is the best agent in the game right now and you should be playing him. Over to initiators, where I generally expected the gap to close a little bit, so I've readjusted some agents back down to accommodate. But the big surprise was how well Gecko's been performing. I didn't expect you guys to be making the most of his util cycle, which is incredible on Haven right now, where you want to poke and prod and skirmish, and Gecko's util allows you to do that at a much faster rate than any other initiator. So he's bringing some genuine competition to Sova, but Sova still does reign supreme on Haven. It'll be interesting to see if that trend continues. An interesting difference between Sova and Gecko is that Sova's KD is generally the highest of all initiators. Across all maps, we're looking at Sova on 0.98, Fade and Sky on 0.94, and a few others below that. But on Haven, that gap widens significantly. Sova's KD increases to 0.99, and the next closest is Sky on 0.92. Gecko actually has the lowest at 0.87, while still having the highest win rate in high elo. So there's a huge opportunity for you Gecko players in low to mid elo to sharpen up your gun skills and get yourselves into good positions, because it's showing that Gecko's util is getting massive baseline value. So if you bring some raw skill to accompany it, you'll be unstoppable. Moving over to controllers, and I think the Clove nerfs will hit hard here. I think we will return to an Omen meta. In most cases, Paranoia still gets all the value that it used to. The only one that's a little bit affected is when you're execing onto a site. You can't hit quad and all of graffiti anymore. And over to Sentinels, where there is something massive we need to talk about. Cypher's moving down to A tier. Haven is where I expected Cypher to survive the best. Everyone was calling him dead. He's still doing fine on Haven. But the knock-on effect of this is that now Killjoy is solo in S tier and dominating. If you're low to mid elo, you might not have noticed this yet, but it'll start trickling down as it always does, because Killjoy is tearing apart high elo on Haven. We've gone into pretty good depth into why Killjoy is good in previous tier lists, so feel free to check those segments out. But the brief summary is multi-lane coverage, incredibly impactful ultimate, self-sufficient, and able to solo carry your team. Over to the main tier list now, and you can see that nice healthy spread between the duelists and initiators, but a little bit of lower clumping for the controllers and sentinels. Cypher is still performing extremely well on Haven. Him or Killjoy are absolute must picks in my opinion. Your team's going to leave gaps and have bad macro and either get lurked on or get flanked. So you can cover all bases, and that's why my duo recommendation is either one of those two with Phoenix as well. Now it's time to dive into Pearl. Jet's going to be sliding down to A tier. She's performing decently well on the map, but not as well as I expected in the new meta. And inversely, Yoru is moving up to S tier. I'd say that Pearl is my second favorite Yoru map behind Bind, and he's exceeded my expectations. I thought that the nerfs would have been enough to bring him down a peg, but what I failed to overlook was the nerfs didn't target the things that he actually does really well on this map, which is fast rotations and info gathering. He can just do things that other agents can't do. He can play in spots that other agents can't because of his TP. Over to initiators, where Fade and Sova are moving back up into S tier. You just get so much benefit from reconning backside, and it's something that I overlooked for sure. Onto controllers now, and starting with Harbor, where he has seen success on Pearl, but with the rework, I don't think he's going to see the same success. It's the same problem that he has on Abyss. That Cascade used to be really good for taking control of B long, and Storm Surge doesn't fill that same gap. Storm Surge will be great for execs. You could use it in screens. You could use it backside A. So I'm moving Harbor up a tier as a solo controller, but moving him down as a secondary controller. As for Sentis, there is a single clear best Sentinel to play on Pearl right now, and that is Killjoy. When we're talking about solo Senti comps, no one can compete with Killjoy. She can contain all of mid whilst also being able to stall on the extremities, and vice versa on attack, she's able to work mid using her turret to protect herself whilst also holding flank for your team. Now let's have a look at the main tier list, and there's some pretty good variation here. Not everyone wants to play Astra, so you'll see a lot of different controllers. And there's a lot of Chamber and Sage floating around, which is adding variety to the Sentinel pool, but those pick rates might drop when people start to realize how good Killjoy is. For your recommended low elo picks, it's just about keeping it simple. Neon and Jet are both great duelists that have their own smoke cover, so you can get deep into sight. Teo and Gecko are both great for force clearing space and have their unique approaches that are really valuable in the post plant. And Brimstone's triple smokes are extra valuable in low elo because it just makes everything that much more simple for your teammates, instead of having to leave one defender entrance open. Neon's featured in 3 of our recommended duos. She is incredibly strong on this map right now. But for low elo, you can get a lot of value by just controlling the map, which is why we have Killjoy Chamber and Clove Viper as our duos, because they can work really synergistically together to get a lot of map control. Now we're moving over to Split, and not too many changes. With Split being a raised map, there's a bit of a natural knock-on effect to the other classes as well. Yoru is definitely struggling to keep up, and that's partly to do with how you want to pair him on initiators. Yoru got nerfed himself, but also Fade and Sova got nerfed, whereas Raze avoided all nerfs, and so did Sky. So if you compare the packages, Raze and Sky, or Yoru and Fade, it's easy to see which way the scale is tipping now. Raze is completely dominating on Split. She's definitely the best duelist right now. As for initiators, everyone's doing okay. I was a little bit high on Gecko. He's coming back down to A tier, leaving Sky solo in S tier. For controllers, call me crazy, but I think this meta could be wide open. Let's start with Harbor. I'm bringing him up to A tier. I think Storm Surge will be really good on this map, and the changes to Cove open up some interesting options. This is a bit of a spicy take for me. I could fall on my sword here. We'll see. Omen's been really struggling on Split as well, so he's coming down to A tier. I think the Paranoia nerf did more than I expected on Split, but he might bounce back in light of these Clove nerfs. As for Sentinels, pretty much everyone is taking a hit. Killjoy is the only one moving up. I haven't personally rated Killjoy on Split ever since the change to her turret from 180-degree view range, but she might just be, for lack of a better term, a stat stick on Split right now. Simply just outvaluing all of the other Sentinels that got nerfed, even if Split isn't the best map for her kit. And everyone just got pushed down because the gap to Sage just got wider. Sage was always good on Split, but now she's pretty much a must pick. Let's have a gander at the full tier list now, and you can see that Raze, Sky, and Sage are sitting alone in S tier. So they're going to be the core that you want to build around. Then you've just got to find your choice of controller and who you want to flex with. If I'm running those 3 agents plus a controller, then I'm definitely favoring Viper for a double controller setup, Neon for a double duelist setup, and Vito for a double Senti setup. Now let's fly over to Sunset for our last map of the tier list. Starting with the duelists, and my poor Waylay has taken a nosedive on Sunset. I think the initiator nerfs are weighing heavily on her in a ranked environment, as well as the nerfs she received. And you'll find it no surprise to see Neon and Phoenix at the top in S tier. For initiators, I've always preached good agent diversity on this map, and after the dust has settled post all the nerfs, it has returned. What you want to focus on when playing initiators is just picking your preferred agent, but I am giving the slight edge to Fade and Sky. If you like to be more calculated but still have the ability to push through your opponents with a util dump, play Fade. And if you want more of an aggressive style with a faster pace, pick Sky. As long as you've got a plan to be able to fight a main, you should be sweet. Over to controllers, where everyone's sort of getting bumped up a little bit to come closer to Clove, who is obviously taking a hit, but this has been Clove's best map, so I find it hard to believe that they'll be pulled out of S tier. Moving on to Sentinels, where Slifer just slips down even further in the rankings to now become the clear worst Sentinel on Sunset right now. It's a huge fall from grace. This time last year, he was the only Sentinel worth picking on Sunset. Then Vice got released, he got shoved out a little bit. The map changed to remove his unbreakable B-site trip, but people still wanted to play him. And now with the latest nerfs, he just does not feel worth picking. Vice is also not feeling as good after these nerfs. I was correct in assuming that for the majority of players, she'd still perform about the same though. But as you climb the ranks, she falls off a cliff. In the higher ranks, you're more likely to use Archers to get high quality info and play off of it, whereas in lower ranks, players just generally use her as a solid anchor, so you haven't lost as much value there. Part of the shove in those high ranked lobbies as well is Vito. He is performing better than I expected already. I mentioned last tier list that this would be one of the most difficult places to play Vito, and the stats kind of back that up. In high elo, people are starting to figure it out. In low elo, it's a step behind. Vito also pairs incredibly well with Sage and Chamber, and those are the two best solo senties on the map right now, so it's easy to slot him into a comp. And looking at our main tier list screen, you can see a pretty healthy meta developing on Sunset, which is exciting. We already have that healthy initiator variance, and if the Clove nerfs are impactful, we might start seeing a really healthy controller meta as well. I've focused on healing in the low elo picks because there are quite a few skirmishy type fights that you'll be having. So Phoenix, Skye, Clove, and Sage, all really solid choices. I hope you guys enjoy, and we'll see you next time.